Hi, I'm Laura from The Butterfly Mother. Please subscribe to this channel for videos about parenting and mental health. And today I want to talk about an anxiety symptom called derealization. I hadn't heard of the word derealization or depersonalisation until I had my son in 2013 and found myself in the midst of postnatal depression and anxiety. It's a symptom of anxiety that I don't think is really discussed as often as it should be, and I've certainly spoke to lots and lots of people who've been affected by it, but it's certainly not talked about as often as, say, panic attacks. Derealization is the feeling of being completely disconnected from who you are, from your life, from everybody around you. It's quite a difficult feeling to describe actually, but the best way I've found to describe it is that it was like I was in a giant perspex box, i.e. I could see everything, I could hear everything, but I just couldn't get through. I couldn't feel completely connected to everyone and everything around me. A lot of people describe it as feeling in a dreamlike state, which I suppose is true, but I wouldn't even want to use that expression just because that makes it sound like something nice, and it is certainly very, very unpleasant and very, very frightening. Feelings of derealization that I had lasted for a really, really long time. I didn't know how to feel normal again, and it was probably the longest lasting symptom out of everything that I experienced. It definitely took the longest time to eventually lift. Why isn't it spoken about more? I don't really know. I think it's just because people don't know what it is and they don't know how to describe it. As I say, it is quite difficult to describe. It's just kind of a feeling of everything being not right and you just being so locked in your own thoughts that you're just not really there anymore. I think also people are reluctant to talk about derealization because it kind of makes you think of other more serious psychological symptoms like delusions and hallucinations, and it's not. It's a completely separate thing. It is, but I think that makes us sort of reluctant to even mention it to anyone in our friends and family or a healthcare professional. I'll say my experience of derealization was absolutely terrifying. I had no idea who I was. I had no idea how to get back to the person that I was before. I didn't feel any sort of, I knew that intellectually I knew I loved my family, but I didn't feel as connected to them in a normal way as I would have done before. And it also went a long way to contributing why I didn't feel connected to my baby. But when I look back, I can see that actually how I felt about everyone in my life and all my loved ones was a little bit off. So how could I expect to feel normal towards my baby as well? I think what's so scary about derealization is that it's constant. It was always with me. I never really had any time where I had any relief from it at the beginning. I was just always under this, inside this horrible bubble, and I couldn't find a way out. And it was the idea that I was never going to find a way out, that I was never going to feel normal and connected and grounded and in the right place in the world anymore, that was so, so frightening, and actually led to some of the suicidal thoughts that I had. So I think the best way to try to give people who are experiencing derealization some comfort is just to demystify it and to discuss why it happens and what it actually is. Derealization is quite simple when you sort of start looking into it. If we are suffering from severe anxiety, and we have been for an established amount of time, then eventually our brain becomes tired and starts to only look internally. So for example, when you're struggling with your anxiety, you might be struggling with lots of physical symptoms. You might be constantly scanning your body to, do I feel this, do I feel that, and you're also probably struggling with a lot of thoughts and emotions. So you're basically focusing internally, you're ultimately focusing on yourself for great portions of your time, sometimes all the time. In my case, it was pretty much all the time at the beginning. So you can imagine that that's pretty exhausting for your brain. Your brain is not used to operating that way. It is not used to analysing every thought and feeling. It's just not normal for your brain to do that. So it knows it has to protect you, and it knows it has to carry out all the basic functions that you need to survive. So it starts to protect itself. And the way it does that is it because you're spending so much time focusing internally, it's kind of too tired to also have the energy to focus on external things as well. So it kind of shuts that part of you down, and it puts that part of you on hold so that it can do all the internal focus that your anxiety is forcing it to do. And that's what causes you to feel disconnected. That's what causes you to feel like you're not rooted in the present moment, and that you're not really there, and you're not real, because your senses are being muffled by the fact that your brain is too busy focusing on all the internal struggles that you're going through. I first learned about this from a book from a man called Paul David, who wrote a book after suffering from anxiety for 10 years, and his book is called At Last a Life. I will put a link in the description below, because I found it personally very, very helpful, not just dealing with derealization, but dealing with anxiety in general. When I first read his description of what derealization was and what caused it, that in itself gave me a great deal of relief, because I was able to realise I'm not necessarily going crazy, I'm not going insane, this is just a reaction to my body being under so much intensive anxiety and stress at the moment. So what can we do about it? I've got 3 tips really on how you can overcome those feelings of derealization. As I say, it was definitely the last symptom to lift for me, so I had managed to overcome pretty much all my other anxiety symptoms, and derealization did hang around for a little bit, so please be warned that you might need to have a bit of patience with it, and that in itself is quite important, because the more we struggle against it, the worse it gets. So my first tip is to get comfortable with that horrible, uncomfortable feeling. This is pretty much a tip that goes for all anxiety symptoms, but it is especially helpful when it comes to derealization. It is, as I say, it is a really, really horrible feeling to feel that unrealness and that, you know, not having connection to yourself and your life. It is really, really unpleasant, but the more you worry about that feeling, the worse it's going to get. And what you really need to do is just go through all the motions of your life, do everything that you would do anyway, and just let that feeling operate in the background. I try to look at it as like a computer's antivirus software. So for example, you're not aware when you're using your computer of the antivirus software that's running in the background, but it is still there, it is running in the background, and that's how you need to look at derealization. Yeah, this horrible, weird, uncomfortable feeling is there and it's not nice, but I'm just going to let it do its thing. I'm just going to know in my heart that it doesn't mean I'm crazy, it's just a symptom of my anxiety, and as I'm treating my anxiety and getting well, that too will start to fade away. So I'm just going to keep getting on with my day-to-day life and being as normal as I can possibly be. Number 2 is to practice grounding techniques and being mindful. So mindfulness in general I think is really, really helpful when it comes to overcoming anxiety, and I think practicing mindfulness, especially with your senses, is really, really important when it comes to recovering from derealization. So by this I mean, if derealization has got particularly bad at any present moment, try to focus in on all your senses and what is happening in that present moment. So what can you hear, what can you see, what can you smell, what can you taste, and what can you feel? And if you focus on those physical sensations, that can help to bring you right down into your body and into the moment, and it can help to alleviate some of that derealization feeling. Meditation is also another really good way of doing this, because it focuses you on your breathing and on the physical sensations in your body. And my 3rd tip is to treat the anxiety itself. So seek help from a professional, make sure you're getting counselling if you can access it, medication if that's appropriate for you. Make sure you are treating the actual anxiety, the cause, the other symptoms of it, and maybe you're going to therapy and doing CBT. Whatever it takes to help you to treat the anxiety will ultimately help the derealization to lift, because it is just a symptom of the anxiety itself. Once you are feeling less anxious, once you are not analysing all your physical sensations or your thoughts all the time, then the derealization will eventually lift. And I promise you, if you seek help for your anxiety and maybe try some of the tips that I've mentioned, you will feel derealization lift from you as well. If you'd like more information about derealization and how I overcame it, I will put a link to a blog post that I've written all about it down below. and please feel free to leave any comments or questions on this video and we'll try to get back to them as quickly as possible. If you'd like to see more videos about parenting, mental health and anxiety symptoms, please subscribe to our channel.